we're going to go ahead and get started. But before I get started, I'm going to go ahead and give our medical disclaimer. So the information provided is for educational purposes and is not intended or a substitute as medical advice of a physician or other qualified healthcare professional. We do not diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any illness or disease. You should always consult with a doctor or other healthcare professional for medical advice or information about diagnosis and treatment. This information in the presentation has not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration or any other medical body. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in this world. This is Dr. Dori, and I'm your host on today's call. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm a clinical researcher and an author of several books. So welcome to our call with Clayton Thomas. This is our product Q&A call. Clayton is the chairman and co-founder of Root. He has over 25 years of experience in the health and wellness industry. And for the last 16 years, he's focused on detoxification and nutraceutical formulations. He has a simple philosophy: cure the cause. So hello, Clayton. And again, welcome to the call.
Happy Tuesday and happy December as we get closer to the holiday season. So 'tis the season to give the gift of health and happiness.
Absolutely. And since you mentioned this great season, well, today, whoops, what happened here? Well, okay, I'll just say that today we're going to actually talk about seasonal affective disorder and how clean slate and zero in can help. But first, I'm going to go ahead and, recap our talk from last week. So last week we met with Teresa on gadolinium toxicity. We also met with Tracy with her dad. She told about her dad, Lori, with Lewy body dementia, and Deborah with MS. So here's Teresa, 14 years of gadolinium toxicity. And it's interesting to note that in all of these testimonials, they only started with 1 to 2 drops, and that was it. 1 to 2 drops and having results, like Teresa within a week. Deborah with MS for 4 years, she's also started 1 to 2 drops, results after 2 weeks. And then of course, Tracy talking about Lori, her dad, with this Lewy body dementia, again, 1 to 2 drops and results like within 3 weeks. And the last, the testimonials that we did last week, I put those 2 videos. I don't know if you saw that, Clayton, but I put the 2 videos showing like before Lori tried the clean slate, and then after, which is really impressive to see those results.
I'm going to have to get in there and dive into it because I haven't done that, but that's pretty.
Thank you. Well, the holiday season of 2020 will be like no other traditional holiday. Never before have there been more cases of holiday blues, seasonal affective disorder, depression, stress, and anxiety. So as the pandemic surges again over the winter months, compounded by cold, wet, dark winter days, many experts report that more and more people experience fatigue and more cases of seasonal affective disorder, which they call SAD. So today, people are facing new anxieties and emotional loss of the holidays because we miss seeing our friends and families. And for some of us who love this time of year, it helps us to get through the winter months by looking forward to all the festivities of bringing in the new year. So what is seasonal affective disorder? It's often abbreviated, like I said, as SAD. It is a type of depression that comes and goes with a seasonal pattern. And you might also hear it referred to as seasonal depression or winter depression. And many people suffer from it during the colder months. However, some people suffer from SAD. They actually express their symptoms during the summer months. So they actually feel better in the winter. So they're actually opposite. Did you know about that, Clayton?
Some people are reverse polarity, and so they do get things backwards, and some people are just screwed up, like me.
Okay. So what are the symptoms of SAD? So the list and signs of symptoms for SAD is basically the same as major depression. However, these signs and symptoms appear and disappear about the same time each year. So the major symptom is sadness. You can experience it in most days. It lasts more than 2 weeks. Basically impairs your performance at work, at school, in social relationships. Other symptoms of depression include changes in appetite, in weight, sleep problems, loss of interest in work, hobbies, people, and sex. Oh, I saw Peter lit up there, and so did Clayton.
Hey, well,
so they don't have those problems. Peter's good. Okay, somebody is making noise.
There we go, Connie.
Okay. All right. So, so what happens also is withdrawal from family members and friends, feeling useless, hopeless, feeling excessively guilty, pessimistic, even low self-esteem. Could be agitation, feeling down, irritability, fatigue, trouble concentrating and remembering, and also making decisions. And you tend to cry easily. So let's look at some of the risk factors. So women are more likely than men, but men do have it. It appears more common among people who live far north or south of the equator. This could be due to a decreased sunlight during the winter and longer days during the summer months. Young people are more likely to develop SAD as it begins. It can actually begin at any age, but it typically starts when someone is between 18 and 30. So a family history of SAD or other forms of depression increases the risk. And people with SAD may be more likely to have blood relatives with SAD or other forms of depression. And symptoms of depression may worsen seasonally if you have one of those conditions. So let's move on. So here are the countries that are affected by SAD, and you can see where you are. So we're over here. Clayton, you're over there.
But the interesting part is where I came from is,
oh yes, over here.
not just there, but way over. You can't see mine, but in Seattle, where I'm from, the seasonal affective disorder is
here.
actually one term that we coined because of some of the depressed people from.
You actually have the highest suicide rate. I mean, years ago, Seattle, Washington actually had the highest suicide rate across the country because of all the gray days that you guys have over there. It's just constantly raining. So you'd actually like it here in Norway because it's like kind of the same weather.
Well, and you brought up an interesting point. And I've already got my list of notes from just this subject because it's been one I've studied a bit on, and we've actually looked at formulating some products specific for this. But the interesting component is what you talked about. People think that the Seattle area and the Pacific Northwest gets massive amounts of rain. It's actually not true. New York gets more rain than Seattle does, but it's the overcast skies that are really the depressive aspect. We don't get as much rain as it's just overcast and cloudy and muggy and
gray.
Gray and
after 9 or 10 consecutive days of gray days, I'm just like pretty much I'm at the limit then.
So you want to hit on a couple more things, or can I dive into some of this?
Just wait. There's a lot more. Hold on. Okay, so what causes it? Right? What causes SAD? SAD appears to be triggered by changes in the amount of sunlight. Researchers have several theories how this happens. So changes in light may be, like can upset the person's biological clock, which controls your sleep-wake patterns, and also disturb neurotransmitters, for example, serotonin and dopamine functions. Oh, whoops. Okay, back. Let me go here. So this is a normal circadian rhythm. Pretty basic, right? So let's go to the next one. Okay, so this one is an example of where I live, southern Norwegian winter. We get 6.5 hours of daylight compared to the normal circadian rhythm. Now, I didn't bother putting up like way up in northern Norway because it'd just be night all the way across. There's like no daylight at all. so I took this one 6.5 hours, and you see like the sun basically is coming up around 9:30, and then by 3:30 it's going down again. So you just have that basically 6 hours. Okay. So let's take a look at serotonin first of all. Serotonin is, as we know, is a neuro, and we've also had this conversation before about these different neurotransmitters, but it all plays in together, which I'm sure Clayton will have a lot to say about this later. So serotonin is a neurotransmitter that helps to regulate mood, and it is known as the happiness hormone. Your gut contains about 95% of your body's serotonin, and it's released when food enters the small intestine. The sunlight keeps serotonin levels high by decreasing the serotonin transporter activity, which is called SERT. So the higher the SERT activity, the lower the activity of serotonin. And for some people, winter can lower the body's production of serotonin. And a shortage may lead to depression and adversely affect your sleep, appetite, memory, and sexual desire. So let's take a look at your pineal gland and melatonin. So the past decade has been seen, we see drastic revisions in the concept of the pineal's role. Once considered a gland, it is now seen as a neuroendocrine transducer that coordinates environmental stimuli such as light and temperature, and responsible for synthesizing the rhythm with the day and night cycle through neural impulses to release hormones. So the best known pineal neural hormone is melatonin. And melatonin is known as the hormone of darkness. And during the night, the pineal gland produces melatonin, which makes people drowsy. And on dull winter days, not enough light is received to trigger this waking up process for some people, and it may be difficult to get up in the morning. So in addition, the pineal gland also has receptors for both dopamine and serotonin. So next we want to look at ocular and melatonin, because in the morning, the bright light of the sun causes the gland to stop producing melatonin. The synthesis and release of melatonin from the pineal gland is heavily influenced by light stimulation and the retina, particularly through the photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, which you can see I've highlighted those on the side there on the right-hand side. So melatonin is also synthesized within the eye, although, to much lesser extent than the pineal gland. So the melatonin actually acts directly on the ocular structures to mediate a variety of diurnal rhythms, your daytime rhythms, and the physiological response, processes within the eye. And the interaction between the melatonin, the eye, and the visual function have been a subject of considerable, with a considerable amount of recent research. So that I thought that was really interesting. Also, let's talk about dopamine and melatonin in temperature regulations. This is really interesting. So dopamine is suggested to have a direct effect on your circadian rhythm by changes in both heat production and heat loss. Isn't it ironic that it's kind of interesting that too much melatonin leads to decrease in body temperature and makes us feel tired? And then dopamine and the circadian rhythms in SAD. Well, dopamine is known as the feel-good hormone. It is released every time we feel pleasure of any kind. It reduces our appetite, increases our energy, increases focus, heightens our physical senses, and gives us a youthful, happy, healthy feeling, and sometimes even a euphoric feeling. And as I stated on the last slide, dopamine has a direct effect on your circadian rhythm and changes in both your heat production and heat loss. And this may be caused by, winter-induced retinal dopamine deficiency and retinal melatonin overactivity. So one way to remedy this is bright light treatment. It helps to normalize these abnormalities. And in the pineal gland, dopamine can stop the effects of norepinephrine, which is another neurotransmitter involved in producing and releasing melatonin. So when influenced by dopamine, your pineal gland makes and releases less melatonin, causing you to perk up. But what does all this have to do with clean slate and zero in? Well, as you can see here, serotonin and dopamine deficiency, there are many stressors, life stressors that can lead to low serotonin and dopamine levels. And you can see Bradley's faces all lit up when I just showed you there. Bradley's favorite.
You have my favorite mustard on there too. It's the greatest ever.
Well, that's thanks to Claire. I asked her, what kind of mustard do you think I should put on there? Oh, Coleman's mustard.
It's the greatest.
Yeah. So, you know, we have prolonged periods of stress, depleting the serotonin and dopamine. We have poor diet and obesity, certain drugs and substances, hormonal changes that cause low levels of serotonin and these neurotransmitter imbalances. But we also have substances, toxic substances like heavy metals, pesticides, some prescription drugs that also, you know, play a role in the damage and the deficiency of serotonin. For example, we have arsenic. Arsenic, as we learned before, disrupts serotonin and dopamine metabolism, which compromises your neuron health. Even at low-level exposure, arsenic predisposes to cognitive dysfunction and susceptibility of mood disorders. We also have thallium. At the cellular level, this has been shown to decrease dopamine and serotonin levels in the brain. And then we also have mercury. Mercury transforms dopamine into a toxic compound. It also lowers the dopamine and causes neurodegeneration. And this also leads to the development of neurological symptoms. So the lowering of dopamine concentration in the brain tissue can cause depression, fatigue, inability to handle stress, finish tasks and focus, mood swings, procrastination, and so forth. So Clayton, that's my rant for today. Back to you.
See, this is the part that I absolutely love about you being able to pick subjects, because I don't get to know what the subject is. So I get to work off of my notes. So as we've been talking, I'm taking my notes because this is so fun. So I'm going to try to work backwards off of where we are and then where you've gone. First things first, of looking at all of these, when we look at the toxicity of issues, and we'll focus on the pineal gland real quick. But some of the foods that we think are superfoods are actually part of the problem. You know, so when we talk about thallium toxicity, right? And thallium, as Dori was just going over, you know, can inhibit dopamine and serotonin and some of the different parts. But it's funny when I was looking at labs of some of our customers in the urine analysis, and I'm a huge advocate for the use of urine excretion analysis and using clean slate, because we can see what's coming out. We had a bunch of people that were throwing a bunch of thallium. I'm like, where's thallium come from? Well, it's interesting because some plants are filters environmentally. We know trees are one of nature's greatest filters because they pull metals and toxins out of the soil and store it in wood. And we know that trees convert carbon dioxide into oxygen, and they're kind of important. But there's a plant called kale that is actually one of nature's best remediators of thallium. So if you are trying to be healthy, right, there's a big kick for kale. And people are eating kale chips and they're trying to replace romaine and other lettuce with kale because kale's healthy. Well, this just in, kale's going to load you up with thallium. And you got to be aware of that. The one thing that we didn't hit on is fluoride, especially when we're talking about pineal gland function. And the pineal gland, on top of everything Dori was hitting on, is considered the light center of the brain, which is how everything else translates. But fluoride, whether you got it in your mouthwash as a kid, God knows why they did that. Maybe it's because it calcifies the pineal gland, slows the brain development down a little bit, makes you a little less smart than you could be, which makes you more susceptible to being indoctrinated. Separate subject. But if you have a calcified pineal gland, you're not going to process light as efficiently, which means you're not going to sleep very well because the melatonin is not going to be produced because in the light center of the brain. And here's the hard part with science. If you really want to screw someone up, screw up their sleep-wake cycle. If you don't get enough sleep, and this has been clinically proven. My ex-wife actually did a study on this in college because they were looking at the process of how sleep deprivation affects IQ, intelligence, brain function. After like 2 days of a lack of sleep, you're basically a zombie. And you look at advertising today, how many different sleep products are sold, whether it's mattresses, pillows, melatonin, all this different stuff to help people improve their sleep when all you need to do is clean them up. And the important component with the ties between the circadian rhythm, as Dori was hitting on, and seasonal affective disorder is multi-layered. We've only got 30 minutes to go through this stuff, and I can talk for hours on this because of the fun that comes in it. But the circadian rhythm is really interesting, right? Because we live in a world today where we have air conditioning, we have central heat in most instances, we have the ability to control our climate. But genetically, and this is like we were joking about, where people live in the world, but also more importantly, where you're from. Mm-hmm. Genetically, where you're from affects your circadian rhythm. Because with our ancestors, if you have northern hemisphere or deep southern hemisphere, and you saw the map that Dori was showing, if you're deep south, if you're in Antarctica and in some places where it gets really cold, or if you're in the northern hemisphere where it gets cold, what do we know about history? What do we know about Aleuts and Eskimos and such? And you can look at animals as well. Polar bears, what do they do during the winter? They fatten up so they sleep, Peter's right, but they fatten up so they have fat stores to stay warm and keep energy so they can hibernate, or they can stay warm. Our problem is we still have those genetics, but we have the ability to control our temperature. So while genetically our body is thinking it's winter time, I need to store fat, we don't want to store fat in the wintertime anymore because we want a summertime body in the winter. So how do you do that? Well, this is better living through biochemistry. How can you tweak? How can you biohack dopamine, serotonin, melatonin, valentinin, pineal gland function? We can go down the list. Your metabolism, stress, seasonal affective disorder. How do you tweak all this stuff? Well, you got to get the toxins out that are inhibiting your system from working properly. And then you want to feed your gut with the key components that you need to override that system. So we can't change our environment. And it's the interesting part of looking at that map again. Dori, can you pull up the map so we can look at this? Because this is what's crucial to understand, right? The closer you are to the equator, the more warmth you have year round. So if you look at many of I'll just say the South American countries that are closer to the equator, people stay lean year round, which is why most of the supermodels come out of those areas, right? Because women are really, really lean. They don't swing in their weight because they're not in the northern hemisphere where their body wants to put on more fat, during the winter time, and then they're constantly trying to balance that. So let me see if I got my notes because I'm hitting on a bunch of that stuff. And the control of light. So you look at many of the cultures and populations that lie in the lighter blue area. They're known for having populations of people that are traditionally more lean, right? To whereas you go into the northern hemisphere, you have people that are, have a higher propensity to having a few more pounds, right? Because it gets colder for us in the wintertime, and we're going to hold on to some of that because we don't like to be cold. But this just in, we've changed a little bit over time. So we have to now reboot or overpower our genetics. And this is where genetics and epigenetics come in, right? Is you can tweak these, and that's really what we're doing, is overpowering or overcoming our genetics and overcoming our environment or manipulating our environment so our internal environment becomes better at dealing with our external environment. So this comes from dealing with the toxins that we always talk about, but it also can be seasonal. And it's a big thing that people spend a lot of money on the West Coast and the Pacific Northwest, of dealing with all these seasonal affective issues. Because of just being around dreary times, they want to feel good, because it's in our nature to want to feel good constantly. We don't want to slow down during the winter, but this just in, we do, because it's in our nature. It's in our genetics to do so, because we get sluggish, right? Because your body wants to slow down. It wants to store fat. You can let it go. You can feel good. I mean, that's what this is for. That's what this little guy does. Clean stuff up, get it out, and you can overcome your environment. The other part with temperature regulation, and you look at the pineal gland, and you look at melatonin, you look at serotonin and dopamine and how they play an account. And here's one of the hard parts, right? When it comes to temperature regulation, and I was learning this with the kids the last couple of days, because the pegacorn, she decided, with it being cold out, we had one day where I think the kids turned up the thermostat in the house. It was like 68 or 69 degrees, and it got kind of warm. So she turned on the AC and dropped it down to 63. And our bedroom last night was 60 degrees.
That's
Inside
nice.
the house, 63. And everybody's going, it's a little bit cold in here. Well, you got to figure that out. But when it comes to temperature regulation, there's one thing that absolutely disrupts temperature regulation. And it's called mercury. Mercury throws everything off. And if you're mercury toxic, and as we know, hold on, this just in, breaking news. Let me go to the Center for News. The news report says we're all toxic in mercury, and you don't have a means of getting it out naturally, which is why we have Clean Slate. So you got to get that stuff out. And then as you do that, and what do we know mercury does? What do we know stress does? What do we know glyphosate does with destroying the microbiome and the biome and the gut, which is where most of these neurotransmitters are produced? You got to get the stuff out. So if you can get the stuff out, then you feed your body with the good stuff, you get to reboot all of this. So I think I hit on everything, because that was phenomenal. You did better than I could. And
We're good. We're good together.
The one thing that is most important for this, that you guys need to understand, is that with lots of good light, you can make sure that you eliminate mogwais and gremlins, because they hate light. And it's winter time, Christmas is coming. So you got to make sure that your family doesn't bring home any gremlins or mogwais. And if they do, get a lot of sunlight, because it's COVID and there's gremlins out. So watch out. But make sure that you clean yourself up, that your brain's functioning well. And I think this is the cool part, because this is the first winter that we've had where people are using Clean Slate and Zero In. So it's going to be interesting to have feedback from people that normally don't do well in this season, right?
Well, speaking of that, let me give you a quick little testimonial, because coming from Southern California and having lived here in Norway for about 20 years now, I actually suffer from seasonal affective disorder. I actually have, like, on my desk here, I have a big Philips bright light that every year I turn that light on. I can actually feel when this kind of depression, or I wouldn't really call it like depression for me, but you just feel down, right? You just don't want to get up at bed. You don't want to do anything, and you just don't feel happy. And I have that light on, and I feel really good when I have the light on. But you know what? I was just having this conversation with Claire today, and I said, you know what? I said, I haven't even turned my light on this whole year, like since the winter started. My light has not come on at all. I don't need it. So, and I know I attributed that to the Clean Slate and the Zero In. And one of the things that I really get a lot of joy from is Norwegian chocolate. So the Norwegian chocolate we have is so good. I'm going to send you some, Clayton. I'm going to send some to Christina because she asked for it. She requested
You
some
see some
Norwegian
lefse
chocolate.
too, because
Huh?
lefse goes perfect with Norwegian chocolate.
I'm not sending you lefse. So I'm going to send you Norwegian chocolate, but it's so good, especially this one with the almonds and the salted almonds. It's so good with the milk chocolate. Anyway, so I was sitting down last night and I was, just kind of coozing myself with it. And I took a couple bites of it and I thought, something's not right here. Like it tasted so off. I couldn't even eat it. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I just bought like 8 bars of this stuff because I was going to send it to our clinic in Texas because I know the girls there love it. But I'm like happy to get rid of it because like I didn't even like it. It didn't even taste right. I thought something's off on the recipe.
Like,
Somebody's
oh, they
messing
screwed
my
up this year.
bar. Huh?
And it's like, oh, they screwed up this year. They didn't make it right. And I think it's the one thing that, I mean, Christina's actually seeing this because she's had some parasite issues from traveling all over the world and spending time in Eastern Europe and having some stuff that we've been working to clear out and using copious amounts of clean slate and doing some other work to kind of clean up her GI. And it's the same thing of as you start to tweak your biochemistry, some things that you're accustomed to as coping mechanisms just don't taste right and they're not needed anymore. The caffeine, the coffee, the chocolate, those little means of just tweaking dopamine that we see on a regular basis that your body tries to tell you, hey, I need this or I need that so I can feel a little bit better, that you don't need them anymore because you are then in control. Now, if you like them, you can use them, but it doesn't become a need.
Yeah, that's
And
true.
it was interesting because I follow a bunch of different people on Facebook and on social media, and it's funny, there's a chiropractor, she's in California and she's a nutritional counselor, as she claims. And she was making some posts this morning about her melatonin consumption and how her melatonin and her sleep strips, I think that she puts on her nose to improve her breathing, help her sleep. And I was like, okay, I need to make a comment on this. I'm like, wouldn't you want your pineal gland just to work properly versus trying to override a system, especially if you're a nutritional counselor and you're one of these wellness gurus, but you're doing the same thing everyone else does by self-medicating in order to overcome your own deficiencies and your own toxicity. That if you take a different approach, which is everything that we're founded upon, quit treating the symptoms, right? Even if it's so simple as, oh, I need a little help getting to sleep. This just in, it's all part of the same issue. And this is so crucial for people to understand, is even these little intricacies, these little things that go on in your life that you think, oh, you know what? It's just part of aging or it's just part of life that I don't sleep very well. Sorry, that's a symptom of you being polluted. And that those little things aren't working, because what's one of the smallest glands in the body that gets more blood flow than every other organ besides the kidneys? It's your pineal gland. And that little guy, like Dori was touching on, is so important because it controls all of this, your happiness, your ability to function well during the day and sleep well at night, which is when you repair, regenerate, detox, and recover, is all done through sleep, which is all controlled through that little pineal gland. So those little things are actually big things. They're just the little warning lights. So if you look at it like a car, your little symptoms that you don't put much thought into are like the yellow light that comes on. And then if you don't address that yellow light, it becomes orange. And then if you don't address that one, it becomes red. And if you don't address that, you get a new car because you killed it. Where with us, you don't have those options. You kill this, you get to move on. You just won't be in this skin suit anymore. And so we get this one to live in. So you got to make sure that your environment is functioning optimally. And that's what we're doing. Simply, easily, with authenticity and integrity. It's good times. So I think we have I know we have a couple comments that need to come in, and there's some questions, and there's a couple testimonials. So you got yours in, which was phenomenal. But we can't
Well, I
have.
also want to say too that I have also noticed the temperature increase, because normally I sleep with 2 duvets on, like big ones, big down, like heavy, right? We have the window open through the whole night. It's never closed. And even in the temperature in the house, that's even lower. I mean, literally, we have the coldest house in Norway. Those of you that have come to our house that know us, all the Norwegians say, "Oh, this is the coldest house in all of Norway." so, like, "Oh, your mother-in-law's coming. My mother-in-law's coming. We have to turn the temperature up." But yeah, so normally I would have like a couple layered, that's what we do here. I'd be layered like with 3 different sweaters on, but this is it. We don't have anything, so the temperature is coming up, which is something that I noticed that as well.
And you're better regulating it, and that,
Yeah.
I think that's the fun part of looking at where we started with having the initial launch in February, to where people started to get products, and now we're being able to look at that data over an extended period of time with how people function. And I think this will be the cool part, or one of the many cool parts of tracking why outcomes are so crucial, that this is your first winter, doing something differently. And if you've been doing this for a bit, or even if it's been a couple weeks for you, you get to see how your body's responding and how things are different. Because God knows 2020 is a little bit different than 2019 and everything else has been, but how we're functioning is different. And I think that's the cool part. Because if everybody does this right, and you eat more corn dogs and you start training, you can look like Peter, just lean and fit and happy all the time.
I bet Peter's never even had a corn dog.
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
we have some questions.
I think we got some questions, but I think before we jump on a couple of those, I know Sandy's got, I was chatting with him a little bit earlier. He had a couple of questions. We need a little Sandy time, and then we'll dive into some of these.
Here we go.
Okay, thanks, Bradley. Thanks, Doc. 3 things. Firstly, I'd like to give a massive, huge big up to the Doc and Claire Harvey for the amazing work that they do in pulling these calls together. There is a lot of behind the scenes work that they do. They start planning the day after the Tuesday calls. They put a lot of work into the slides, and I have been on every single call since March. And I've learned, these calls were for the Doc's Norwegian group initially, but it's just grown and grown and grown. And I have learned more about health and wellness, thanks to you, Clayton, and you, Doc, and Claire, than in the past 4.5 years of trying to get mum better by taking her to see all these naturopaths and stuff. And you guys don't get paid for it. So thank you so much. Thank you. Secondly, I came across this testimonial in the Slovenian group. And Clayton, you probably, I don't know, you might have seen it. It was a comment, and I thought it was just mind-blowing. Hello, yes, very big changes after a stroke in a family member. The stroke resulted in loss of short-term memory and then ignorance, this is the translation, then ignorance of letters doing basic life things, loss of concentration, headaches, etc. Somewhere after less than 3 months of taking both products, the conditions began to improve, and to this day it has improved for like 80%. Both products have been enjoyed for 8 months and will definitely continue. I was blown away by that. Stroke, mind-blowing. Thirdly, I've got a stage 4 cancer customer on Clean Slate, and she's on immunotherapy. She's on a drug called regorafenib. Have you ever heard of that?
Not that one. I could probably pull the unicorn, but you're gonna lead me to slaughter. But keep going, and then I'll try to backtrack.
Okay,
I'll cut that part out.
I can answer it properly, but let's walk down this path so we can be informative. And
no,
let me go back to the disclaimer real quick that we're not treating any disease states. And here's the big thing with cancer. Actually, and here's the fun part. When we talk immunotherapy, I have a call tomorrow with Scott Hamilton and his executive director, because Scott, if you follow figure skating, and I know you all do.
I do.
I mean, Scott's one of the most amazing guys. One, he was the first one to do a backflip on the ice. Now, and this is interesting because when I tried to ice skate the first time, I too did a backflip, but it was not intentional. It was a pure show of athleticism that was not needed, with my feet going over my head hitting the ice, and then my heels hitting the ice at some point after that. But Scott's had cancer 4 times, testicular cancer initially. And you talk about brain cancer, right? He had testicular cancer the first time, and then, so he had brain tumors and then brain tumors. How horrible is that? I mean, you think of the twins getting cancer once, and then the twins up here, both lobes getting cancer. I mean, and he's gone through it, but he's a huge advocate for immunotherapy. And his foundation is focused on, providing immunotherapy benefits to the cancer community and doing research in that. We were having, I was at his fundraising event a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about immunotherapy. And we have a little difference in opinion on immunotherapy. He wants to look at it at a treatment standpoint. For me, immunotherapy means cleaning the mess up and allowing your body to deal with it. And I think this is the important part of you can say complementary approaches to wellness, not medicine, but complementary approaches to being well. And in so doing, if you're well, and this is what's so crucial, if you're well, you can't get cancer, because cancer is just a natural biological process of cells becoming abnormal and not turning off properly. And then they start communicating with other cells and they proliferate. And it's that warning light, right? If you don't pay attention to the little things that are going on in your system, you're not going to see those warning lights. And eventually you get a really bright red light that says, hey, you don't address this, you're not going to be here anymore. That's cancer. So that's our position. We don't, and it sounds cold, we really don't care what your diagnosis is, because you are not your diagnosis. You're just an amazing, beautiful cesspool. And as Mark changes the channel, hopefully he's watching, not CNN. It's one that he's trying to find corn dog commercials, because I know he wants Coleman mustard. And the key to this is mayonnaise with the mustard. You want amazing, tasty goodness. That's my redneck raising right there, is the mayonnaise with the mustard on the corn dog. You want to know how I was raised? That's it. And that's how I can't get cancer. That's how I can't get cancer. It's corn dogs, mayonnaise, and Coleman's mustard. That's the secret to longevity, because then your body is so preserved with nitrates. It's like just drinking embalming fluid and formaldehyde. You're embalmed. It's great. You can't age. But yeah, it's the cancer side. So if you're doing immunotherapy, what you're doing with Clean Slate and Zero In really is immunotherapy, because it's allowing your immune system to start working properly, but it's complementary in those aspects. And
she wants to know if she can take Clean Slate with immunotherapy. That's the question.
Yeah, and what I would do, and you can do this with, if you're using carboplatin or cisplatin, which are chemotherapeutics, they're both platinum-based chemotherapies that are typically used in breast cancer therapy. Because they're platinum-based, they're heavy metal-based, and if you're going to use Clean Slate, and you're going to go, if you're going to endure a process that includes that, or immunotherapy, if you're going through allopathic treatment for some of these issues, and you're using your clean slate, before you go in for your appointment to do those other therapies, stop a day before with clean slate use, do your therapy, wait a day after, right? To allow those issues to work. The same thing goes with gadolinium and MRIs. And we saw Teresa's testimonial, which is absolutely amazing. And if you guys haven't watched Teresa's testimonial, you need to, because gadolinium toxicity is, I think, more prevalent than people understand because of the use as a contrast agent in MRIs, which is where it's primarily used. And understand, it is a radioactive isotope that doesn't have means of getting out of your body. So if you've ever had one dye-contrast MRI, part of you is glowing for the rest of your life. But those that have had multiple, I mean, that stuff builds up and it wreaks havoc on you. So you've got to get the stuff out. But if you are going to do a dye contrast MRI, if you're going to do all these other things, stop a day before, wait a day or so afterwards, allow those things to work, and then work to clean the body up. Because what clean slate is and what zero in is, and this is so important, is why the twins are together, right? And I look at the data on consumption, and it's about 2 to 1. So we sell about twice as much clean slate as we do zero in. There's a reason for that. Clean slate's absolutely amazing. But they're twins for a reason. They're designed to be taken together, and they're extremely complementary. So if you are already compromised, and this is the interesting part, is we are all compromised. We just show symptoms differently. I'm as jacked up as anybody. I mean, look at me. You look at my hair. I mean, my craziness. But I'm like organized chaos. And you know, I watch Peter's videos when he's training in the morning, and I want to grow my beard out like that. And you can see it doesn't work very well. I just don't have the character development in me. And we're all just polluted in different manners. And it's simple. Wellness is now simple. As we talk about, it's addition by subtraction. Remove the bad stuff, feed the good stuff, watch good things happen. There we go. So I know you've got more to go on, so keep going.
Well, my final question is blood thinners, because we've seen what it does to a smoker's blood. So I'm presuming it won't thin, like if someone's on blood thinners, it's okay to take.
Yeah, and I think this is one thing I'm going to go over here in about 10 minutes is some of the questions. If you're on any medication, right, and you want to use clean slate, you want to use zero in, and Dori's a phenomenal example of this because of her history, right? I mean, she's written a couple books on heart attacks and cardiovascular health because of her own personal experiences. If you're taking medications, you don't take them because you're well, right? You're taking them as part of a managed care model. I mean, Mark's such a phenomenal example because of his journey as well, right? He wasn't using all of these things because his legs look great, right? He was using them to manage issues that were part of an underlying problem. So whether it's blood thinners, if you're using warfarin or Coumadin, and this just in, you understand that's freaking rat poison. You understand that? Warfarin and Coumadin is arsenic and rat poison. Not helpful, but it thins your blood. So if these things are happening, they're all symptoms of toxicity, right? Because we have the compendium that Dori's put together, and it's probably even more deep than she's done before. But all of these little things, if you start doing searches and you can tie this data together on your own, you're going to see that heavy metal toxicity, glyphosate, environmental toxins are the primary cause of all of these issues. So as you start to clean yourself up, you have to work with your practitioner, your healthcare professional. That could be an MD, it could be an ND, it could be a DO, DC, could be a nutritionist, a whatever, biofeedback, resident PhD super genius like Dori because of all the extra work she does. And I can't speak to how amazing of an asset she is because of her research in stem cells, because of the energetic research she's done, the amount of knowledge that she has, that Claire has, that Peter has, that Mark has, that I could go down the list. collectively that's here, there's so many levels of genius that you guys have to understand that if you start to clean up the mess, things are going to change, and that you have so many different references that if you're medicated, you're not being medicated to get you well. So as you go on that journey, you're going to have to tweak some stuff, because as you get healthier, you might not need the things that are designed to medicate you or manage your symptomology, right? Because those symptoms will decrease as you get healthier, and eventually the medication to manage those symptoms is going to be decreased. Because what happens if you stay on the same amount of drugs in your biology and your system starts to improve? Well, the end of the commercial can start. And what's the end of the drug commercials? It's not the benefit, it's all the side effects. And you don't want the side effects. So as a drug starts to work better because it's working in a better environment, you might not just get the benefits of that medication, you might get more of the side effects that you'd never seen before, because your metabolism is starting to work better. So you have to play that balance. So.
Well, let me just say this, that, you know, when I first started with, well, first of all, let me just say, Sandy, thank you very much for the shout out there. Really appreciate that. And Clayton too. And of course, Claire, for all the great input that she gives me, and we work on these together. So we have a lot of fun doing it. But so I just want to say that, you know, when I started with all these products, I mean, well, the only two products, right? Clean Slate, Zero In. But before, we just had Zero In. And of course, all of you know that I've had blood pressure issues for over 30 years. And I never, like, I always take everything like away from my medication. I mean, I would do it like either an hour before or 2 hours after the medication. And as a result, like as you know, Clayton, I mean, I don't even take my blood pressure medication anymore. So that's 30 years of blood pressure medication. And that's about heavy metal detoxing. It didn't matter, you know, like what I ate. It didn't matter how much I exercised, because, you know, I've done a lot of exercise. I would do like, you know, 10K one day, 5K the next day. I would alternate this. Didn't matter how much weight I, you know, if I was at my ideal weight, it didn't matter. My blood pressure was still high. So the only thing that made a difference was the clean slate. And so that's all I wanted to say, was basically I take my clean slate away from anything else. Well, now I don't take anything, so it doesn't really matter, except for my thyroid. I do take my thyroid. I still take that, but I take clean slate away. I don't take it together with my thyroid, because I want to make sure that that's working properly. So.
Well, and how do you know that your thyroid is starting to work properly? Temperature regulation, not being stressed out in the winter time.
My hair's not falling out. That's a big thing. Yeah, this is true too.
So you start putting those little pieces together, and you go, you know what? Things are starting to come in line. And one day my intelligence level will boost up enough that I'll be able to have good conversations with you versus having to make stuff up.
That's not true. You're very intelligent.
Well, I don't look it, and that's what I'm told all the time. I mean, I try to be deceitful. So, you know, I really appreciate it, everybody. You know, thanks for being here. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for sharing with your friends, because, you know, I was making this comment the other day, and we talk about rewards, and it's the holidays, right? So it's all about giving, right? And we all have the ability to give the gift of health and happiness right now. And we know, because of how crazy a year this has been, but also just in this subject, you know, there's a lot of people that just don't feel as good right now. And it's a holiday time. And while most of us have an opportunity to spend time with our families, there's a lot of people who don't, for one reason or another. And this period of time of the year is really stressful for a lot of people. So, you know, you have an opportunity to have a pretty profound impact on people biochemically just from sharing. So don't be afraid to do that, and don't be afraid to give hugs, because we know hugs are cool too. Because hugs are actually.
Well, if you think about it, this is the way we hug people. Like, this is the new way, Zoom calls. Yeah. We're hugging everybody.
Actually, to increase oxytocin, as you know, Dori, and as many of us know, you have to do hugs for 20 seconds.
Yes.
And you have to do heart hugs too, because you have to hug the left side, so you get heart hugs. So I think if everyone hugged their screen for 20 seconds, we could solve so many problems. And
Let's not try that.
I know it would be awkward. So I got to bounce so we can get to the chaos.
Let's get to the next call.
So happy Tuesday, everyone. Thanks for coming. And don't be sad, be happy. And as a wise man once said, don't worry, be happy.
All right. Good night, everyone. Thank you so much. See you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Guys. See you in a minute.
Dori,
Thank
you
you.
Bye.
Dori, you gonna send me the link to the meeting, please?
Thank you. Ciao.
Can anybody send us the link? I don't even know what the link is. Wait a minute. I should know it.